Good morning, everyone. Our distinguished guest has arrived. Please stand and welcome them with enthusiasm. I invite all the guests to move forward to the front row and let's give them a hearty round of applause. Please be seated. Welcome to the 18th International MEPC Conference 2K25-26 organized by Marymatha Institute of Theology. First and foremost, every Catholic educational institution is a place to encounter the living God who, in Jesus Christ, reveals his transforming love and truth, says Pope Benedict XVI. Marymatha Major Seminary consistently guides and transforms its students through the pastoral and human qualities of Jesus Christ while also imparting philosophical and theological knowledge attuned to the signs of the times. To this end, the Marymatha Institute of Theology organizes annual international conferences under the auspices of Marymatha Encounters of Pastoral Challenges MEPC. On the occasion of the 60th anniversary of the Second Vatican Council, to explore the reception, interpretation, and lived experience of Vatican II within the life and mission of the Church in India, we have selected the topic 60 Years of Reception of Vatican II by the Church in India this year. May this conference reflect on Vatican II's legacy in India and wish you all a good time of reflection and intellectual clarity. We begin this day with a prayer by the seminary choir. I request everyone to kindly rise. Thank you, Marymatha choir. Now I invite all the dignitaries, Dr. Benedict Lemlin, Dean, the Faculty of Theology and Religious Studies, KU Leuven, Dr. Dries Boschard, Professor, KU Leuven, Dr. Hans Auslust, Professor, UC Lua, Reverend Dr. Paul Pulliken, Director, Marymatha Institute of Theology, to the dais. And I invite Reverend Dr. Paul Pulliken for the welcome address.
dear Very Father Rector Sebastian Chalakil, dear Professor Dr. Benedicte Lemlin, the Dean of FTRS, Faculty of Theology and Religious Studies, K. Leuven, Professor Dr. Dries Borchardt, Professor of Church History in K. Leuven, and Professor Dr. Hans Auselus, Professor of Biblical Theology in UC Leuven, Belgium. Dear fathers, sisters, dear brothers, dear invitees, dear participants, dear delegates from the college, a warm good morning to you. Today we celebrate the 60th year of the Second Vatican Council. The year of celebration, of course, is just passed. As we know, it was in 1965, December 8th, the council came to conclusion. And now in the past 60 years, there have been years of renewal and reform. And we know that the council was moved by aggiornamento and risorgimento, updating of the church and return to the sources. And then as we celebrate the 60th anniversary, we will ask, what does Vatican II mean for us today? Anniversaries are not just about remembering the past. They are about renewing the commitment. The Council's vision remains unfinished. And you know, Pope has started a special catechesis on Vatican II. We are called to be a listening church, listening to scripture, listening to tradition, and listening to the lived experience of people today. And we are also called to be a missionary church, not closed in oneself, but reaching out to the margins. We are called to be a united church, not uniform, but united in diversity. 60 years later, the question is not whether Vatican II was important. History has already answered that. The real question is whether we will continue the spirit of Vatican II. Will we be a church that engages the world with confidence and humility? Will we be a community where every person recognizes their baptismal dignity and responsibility? Will we continue the work of dialogue, peace, and justice? And we are reflecting on these points, different dimensions of Vatican II in these days. And I assure, I hope and I wish you a very fruitful 2 days of discussion, reflection, discussion, and further deliberations. And I'm very happy to welcome our guests today. Benedicte Lemlin, she has the degrees BA in Theology, MA in Theology, and in 1997, she was promoted to Doctor in Theology at K. Leuven. And in 2003, she was appointed as Professor of Old Testament in K. Leuven, and she is the director of the Louvain Center for Septuagint Studies and Textual Criticism. In this capacity, she coordinates several research projects as well as other projects regarding a number of more theologically oriented themes. And she has been the Dean of the faculty since 2022. And we are so happy that they are visiting our institute, Marymatha Institute of Theology, after it has been erected as a canonical person by the Dicastery of Education and Culture in Rome. And we know that there has been tremendous amount of work that she has put in to make our dream come true, to make our institute the first affiliated institute of the prestigious Catholic University of Leuven. So, dear Professor Dr. Benedict Lemlin, a cordial welcome to you to our midst. And Professor Dr. Dries Boschart, a friend of mine. We are in the Church History Department in KU Leuven. Dries is a specialist in the Second Vatican Council, and I always remember him working in the Second Vatican Council archives. You know, there is an important archive in the library of KU Leuven. There you have primary sources, many primary sources of the council participating bishops. And whenever I go, I visit, and then he is very gracious to provide me a chair at the archives. And he is also involved very much in the new series of commentaries that are appearing already, Legacy and Mandate of Vatican II. And it is first time that he is visiting Marymatha and South India. He has been once to North India. Dear Dries, I welcome you to Marymatha Institute of Theology very cordially. And Hans Auslus, Professor of Old Testament in Louvain-la-Neuve. Louvain-la-Neuve means New Louvain, which is another town near KU Leuven. And there is the French-speaking Catholic University, and he is Professor of Old Testament there. And you know that he is the loving husband of Benedict Lemlin. Yeah? You know that. So they have been to our seminary, our institute 2 years ago. And Hans Auslus obtained his doctorate in theology with a dissertation on the Deuteronomic editing of the books of Genesis, up to and including Numbers. In 2003, he was appointed Professor of Biblical Studies at the Faculty of Theology and Religious Studies at the Catholic University of Leuven. In 2010, he became a research professor at Université Catholique de Louvain in Louvain-la-Neuve, and at present is Director of Investigations of the Fonds de la Recherche Scientifique. He founded the research group Septuagint Studies and Textual Criticism within the Research Institute Religion, Spiritualité, Culture, Société, of which he is the director. Scholarly work focuses mainly on the study of the origin and textual transmission of the Old Testament, about which he has published numerous books and articles. Dear Professor Hans Auslus, a cordial welcome to you to our conference. So we have delegates from different colleges, St. Mary's, Vimala, Prachodhi-Niketan, Don Bosco, and we have delegates from the BA Theology students from the Institute of Theology, the BCLC, and we have several participants. We have sisters, we have novices from CMC Trichur province, and we have, of course, our own brothers, seminarians here. And I welcome everyone cordially, and I wish we will have a fruitful 2 days of conference reflecting on Vatican II. I welcome you all. Just some practical hints. The prizes of the batch, first and second, will be, and also the other prizes will be given by the Dean after her speech. And brothers asked me how to write. This is part of the program where you get also the points, the credits. So you need not write and submit some big papers, but you note down the points of the different talks, and immediately after the conference, you gave it. You need not write in a big with margin and column. No need. Just listen and attend all the conference, all the papers, and send your notes, and you can do that, and you can submit that at the end. Thank you very much.
We extend our cordial welcome to Reverend Dr. Paul Pulikin, the pioneer of this conference. It is my great privilege to invite Dr. Benedict Lemlin, Dean, Faculty of Theology and Religious Studies, KU Leuven, to deliver the inaugural address.
Let me start by greeting you, but foremost expressing my deep gratitude for being your guest today. It's indeed a great joy to address you today at this 18th International Conference within the Marymatha Encounters of Pastoral Challenges on the festive theme of 60 years of reception of Vatican II by the Church in India. Speaking about pastoral challenges on the one hand, and on the jubilee of a pastoral milestone like Vatican II on the other, is actually speaking about the process of intrinsic learning, about progressive insight and distinctive reflection throughout the years up till the actual time. Fundamentally, it is about a learning experience, a progressive development in true understanding. And that is precisely the reason why I would like to focus in this inaugural address on a few thoughts on learning. Indeed, learning and its process of understanding, its development and design of hermeneutical perspective, and its necessary actualizing interpretation and continuously growing insights. To do so, I reach back to Seneca's famous saying, "We do not learn for school, but for life. Non scholae sed vitae discimus." A short sentence with a deep meaning. It seems to reflect or meta-reflect on the aim and goal of learning. Seneca's saying seems even rooted in some kind of disappointment about the reality which he observes. It denies something that seems to be taken for granted, but pushes it further to an apparently less evident reality. So first, something on the aim of learning. Also in our days, the same questions could rise when looking around. Is it merely your own ambition that strives for more knowledge or perfection? Do we aim at more scientific research in our faculties to only acquire a higher place in the rankings? Do we stimulate our students to study more intensely to be the best, or at least to become better than others? Is it our desire for competition to know more than others? Do our students, even those having chosen theology as a major topic, mainly learn for grades and marks and brilliant certificates in order to gain attracting positions in the inner world of the academy or prestigious positions within the church? Is that a reality that is fulfilling our desires? Seneca already noticed that all of that does not make education valuable. What then makes it worthwhile to strive for? It is as simple as it is fundamental. It is about its relevance in and impact in our lives. Vitae discimus. We learn for life. Ultimately, we do learn with a view on becoming intrinsically rich human beings, and consequently, we teach in order to form critically thinking human persons. People who will be able to dispose themselves at service of their fellow human beings, to all those entrusted to them one day, to create opportunities in turn to develop themselves and flourish in a world that always transcends us. Or, in Martha Nussbaum's words, I quote, to become critical thinkers and to become empathetic and democratically minded citizens. Something on the attitude of true learning. Second point, it should indeed be that intrinsic aim that moves us forward to learn deeper and to teach constructively. Moreover, learning implies a specific disposition. Even more, the desire to really learn implies several fundamental qualities. Firstly, it has to do with a true openness of mind. Secondly, it involves modesty. And thirdly, it allows for self-criticism. First, again, an openness of mind is needed in order to enable oneself to ask questions, to be open to new perspectives, to question one's own lens. Second, all of that implies modesty. The disciple knows that he does not know. He wants to know more. He wishes to understand by learning and to learn by listening. All of that implies, in turn, listening to a teacher whom the disciple respects and trusts as someone knowing more, being wiser, and showing the way or demonstrating the method, passing on both ancient tradition and new insights, synergically synthesized. And three, indeed, all of that presupposes the ability to question oneself, to be open to self-criticism, to search for nuanced answers, even if that means the letting go of the fit for once and all solutions. As a biblical scholar, I would like to refer to the Bible at this point. In the Bible, good teachers and true disciples are characterized by the same qualities and realities. Biblical literature shows how both literary characters or historical figures function as teachers, as well as how texts themselves or even other means can take over the role of a teacher. Taking a turn to Jesus himself, depicted regularly as a rabbi, a teacher, and his apostles being characterized as disciples, or his audience described as people listening to his words and wisdom, we can indeed observe that the same fundamental disposition is actual. Be it the crowd listening to him at the shore of the Sea of Galilee, or be it Nicodemus at night listening to his wise words, it is about deep learning. It is about an openness of mind to allow a new perspective. It is about the modesty to let oneself be corrected. It's about opening one's eyes, literally or figuratively, to new paths to follow and new choices to make. And taking one step further beyond Jesus, it is evident that the scriptures themselves function as a teacher, even to Jesus himself. If the biblical teacher is the one who actualizes the scriptures, then indeed that is exactly what Jesus does when he confronts the ancient prescriptions of the Torah to his actual reality. When he opposes the old sayings with his own "but I say," when he reinterprets and corrects the rules which the scribes have made out of living narratives that were meant to create life. And indeed, we observe that the biblical text even reinterprets itself in changing new context. The message of Proto-Isaiah, the first part of Isaiah, is very different of the tone of Trito-Isaiah, evolving from a warning to an almost utopian hope and eschatological promise. And even the Ten Commandments, depicted as written in stone, present themselves in two different versions and are alluded to in quite a number of differing ways in different texts. If the Bible as a true teacher allows for itself to reinterpret and actualize, it is the same need for re-actualization of those living scriptures that forms the only way forward when reading them today as a source of inspiration in our lives. And here it is, the next step, where exegesis comes in. Indeed, it is needed first and foremost to become conscious of the fact that this Bible, as a true teacher, is also a strange teacher from strange times and odd places. Only allowing ourselves to really consider that can create the possibility for this biblical teacher to reinvent itself again and again. Also today, when still facing the same so-called existential questions about life and death, love and pain, illness and pleasure, vulnerability and fragility, about which the Bible talks. Precisely in that context, it could be tempting to look for ready-made answers in that old book, to open, so to say, the recipe book, and to look for what we want to find. The word Bible can sound very familiar to us, and effectively, it is very much the foundation of our Judeo-Christian faith. Yet the Bible is first and foremost a very strange book. Only when we are fully aware thereof, we will be able to look for ways in which it can still mean something in our lives. A look at a number of aspects of this strangeness will illustrate the difficulties and will ultimately help us to transcend them. And here we meet indeed another teacher in and throughout the development of historical critical exegesis. A number of observations, very shortly, that seem almost basic today are in fact really essential, and I repeat them succinctly. Although in religious language we sometimes say that a text from the Bible addresses us, literally nothing could be further from the truth. None of us is addressed. No text in the Bible is addressed to people of the 21st century. No reader today is part of the original living world of the biblical authors. When the prophets speak about apostasy and injustice, they are addressing the Israelites of the first millennium BC. And when Paul writes a letter to the Corinthians, he is not speaking to people in Western Europe or India in the year 2026. Just the example of a letter read by someone other than the addressee, where it is soon apparent that this third person does not immediately understand what is meant, makes it clear that the problem is very concrete. We need background information to be able to interpret what it's about. Similarly, that is true when reading biblical text. Secondly, none of the books in the Bible is written in a modern living language. Biblical literature is written in Hebrew, in Greek, and Aramaic. Whoever wants to read the text in its original form is confronted to a serious barrier. Learning those foreign languages is not easy. The language system is very different and the vocabulary is sometimes really unclear. In this context, we often base ourselves on translations. But as you know, translations are always interpretations. So when we read the Bible in our liturgy, for example, in a translation, we read an interpretation to a second degree. Interpretation of an interpretation. Thirdly, There is a huge cultural and chronological gap between the original writers and readers of the biblical texts and us readers of the 21st century. The living world of biblical texts is that of the ancient Near East, a predominantly patriarchal culture without any women's emancipation, no globalization, strongly agriculturally oriented, and getting its rhythm from the seasons. Slavery was accepted, medicine undeveloped, mortality high, and life expectancy low. This cultural gap implies that the biblical text, when read by contemporary readers, needs historical, cultural clarification. Moreover, not only the chronological gap, but also the cultural gap is evident. There is a huge chronological gap, but also a cultural gap. If one were to read a newspaper article from 1950, for example, it wouldn't be easy to immediately understand what this article is about. You would need some information on the background of the hot issues that were debated in those days. Well, when we speak about the Bible, then it's not about 70 years of distance, it is about 2 millennia. So we need indeed lots of background information to be able that. And since exegesis also has taught us that the Bible is no history book, but rather religious literature that seeks to proclaim, any account of so-called historical events should also be interpreted with serious caution. And there is even more to worry about when discussing of fourth aspects. When we think, for example, on the Declaration of Human Rights, or even the documents of the Second Vatican Council, to which I return later, it is immediately clear that these are documents that came about as the result of a growth process in which a text took shape through the work of various authors, redactors, editors, and so forth. In parallel, most probably, no single Old Testament book was written by a single author. If the book of Isaiah, in its 3 major sections, echoes situations between the 8th and 6th century BC, it may soon be clear that no single one historical person, Isaiah, can have written it in its present form. Rather, the present form of the book is the result of a very complex and lengthy process of editing, rewriting, updating, and supplementing, in short, re-actualization within the Bible itself. The Bible is the reflection of cultural and theological thought from different periods, which moreover was written down by various authors over different centuries in a collection of books, many of which were repeatedly edited and re-actualized and subsequently transmitted in different textual versions. And that brings me to a fifth element. There is no actual autograph of any of the biblical books. Even more, the oldest complete Hebrew text dates only from around the year 1000 of our era. In addition, in the second half of the 20th century, numerous ancient, albeit mostly fragmentary, manuscripts of the biblical text were found, of which the Dead Sea discoveries are the most important, dating from the 3rd century BC to the 1st century after Christ. Some of these texts contain textual versions and variants that differ in important ways from the above-mentioned complete Hebrew text. Sometimes this is due to deliberate reinterpretation and again re-actualization, sometimes simply based on accidental mistakes. But one thing is clear: the biblical text we usually refer to is not the text, but is a text. And this awareness alone already may keep us far away from fundamentalistically perceiving the text as absolute. Finally, within world literature, the Bible can very definitely be counted among the so-called classics. It is literature on general human themes and existential issues for all times. However, the Bible possesses an extra dimension. It functions within a community of faith. Therein, the scriptures have somehow acquired divine authority in such a way that they are considered holy scriptures. That fact implies that when one interprets biblical texts, one joins a long line of teachers who have sought to understand and explain the text. On the one hand, this is easy. But on the other hand, this embedding should not be an excuse for not going into the same interpretational process. Readers today must also dare to let go this age-old tradition, creating space for other, new, possible, and legitimate interpretations and new actualizations. Thus, facing this strange character of the biblical tradition immediately reveals its own ongoing process of interpretation, reinterpretation, and actualization. And precisely allowing that process is the fundamental quality of a teacher. We focused on the learning, now we focus on the attitude of true teaching. In that way, both the Bible itself, in its inner biblical exegesis, as well as the development of exegetical approaches to its interpretation and reactualization, can function as teachers in the process of our understanding of this ancient tradition of existential reflection and deep faith. Beyond any historization or fundamentalist affirmation of the biblical narratives, it is clear that precisely this kind of observations have led at the heart of historical critical exegesis. The Bible was not characterized anymore as an objective report of historical facts, but rather as faithful reflection on the realities in which it developed. At the beginning of the 20th century, exegetical scholarship demonstrated conclusively that biblical narratives could no longer be interpreted as objective eyewitnesses' accounts of historical facts. On the contrary, the texts that paint a picture of how Israel fared are theological texts, which have undergone a long and complicated process of development. The Bible is primarily literature that seeks to proclaim rather than to describe. Consequently, anyone who wants to engage honestly with the Bible must distinguish between historical reality and its theological interpretation, reinterpretation, and actualization, even within the Bible itself. What is important is the deeper message which the biblical authors wanted to convey about what was at stake within their historical communities. When the texts are taken seriously in this way, it is not about trying to prove the Bible's right in historization or fundamentalism, but about critically interpreting historicity in and through biblical narratives within the context of an understanding that conceives the Bible first and foremost as developed religious literature. However, this insight itself is the result of gradual understanding that marked the development within biblical scholarship. Progressively, the emphasis and focus has shifted from the history behind the text to the history of the text. In particular, the origin and development of the text itself, in its multiple origins and complex editorial layering, as well as its own phases of inner biblical reinterpretation and actualization, became the object of study. And within this development, one sees fairly a further shift that no longer places the development of the text, but mainly the relevance and theological meaning of the final text at the center of attention. Admittedly, this too must always be done in awareness of the fact that this so-called final text is a developed text. The final text is a complex literary composition but it has by no means suddenly fallen out of the blue. If the inner biblical reinterpretations as well as development of exegesis have learned us one thing, it is that our insights do indeed change and develop, that our evolving contexts reveal new aspects, and that our knowledge of an ever-transcending reality, which God ultimately is, cannot be captured in any single human answer. Being conscious of that fact, indeed, we do not learn for school, but for life. We do not study the Bible merely for the sake of academy and science. Rather, we should remind ourselves of the fact that the Bible consists of the real reflections and the deep faith of living people in their own living reality and context, sharing those insights with a view to a living reality today in different and ever-changing contexts with our own particular sensitivities today. Let true learning be guided by true teaching, open-minded, modest, and self-criticism. In conclusion, if the scriptures reveal themselves as teachers in actualizing and re-actualizing their central messages, and if current exegesis has demonstrated that they did so time and again within their changing context, we can observe that the fundamental attitude of true teaching corresponds to the same qualities which we described within the attitude of true learning: an openness of mind, modesty, and self-criticism. Also, the teacher, like the disciple, should keep an open mind to observe, to understand, and interpret an ever-changing reality, and to be open to reconsider truths and values within changing context. He should be modest in not defining his own truths as ultimate once and for all. And in doing so, he should be ready to develop a nuanced and critical attitude towards the content of his own teaching. And that brings me to the very final element when we make a step from the Bible to Vatican II, learning and teaching on Vatican II. Focusing on the interpretation and continuous reinterpretation of the Bible through a process of actualization leads us to what all of you will be doing these days. Of course, I knew, and I know very well, that this conference is not on the Bible, but on the interpretation and meaning of Vatican II after 60 years. And thereby we meet the second pillar of our faith. Next to the scriptures, we accept tradition and the authority of the church. And indeed, compared to the teaching role of the inner biblical understanding of the scriptures themselves and their reinterpretative exegesis, the analogy on the process of interpretation and reinterpretation, of actualization and hermeneutical understanding within different contexts is very strong when talking about understanding Vatican II. The reflection, the concepts, the context, the ideas, and even the material world of Vatican II was very different from ours today. Things that were evident those days are not evident anymore. Society has changed. The role of the church on the one hand and the meaning of religion as such on the other have strongly been transformed. Nevertheless, Vatican II itself had the intention of bringing faith and church closer to its contemporary society. Ancient concepts had to be reconsidered, altered, and nuanced. To just name one example, the view on marriage changed strongly from a contract to a covenant. Although marriage and the family are mentioned directly or indirectly several times throughout the ecclesiastical documents of Second Vatican Council, when marriage as such is discussed, reference should primarily be made to Gaudium et Spes, where in a separate chapter, numbers 47 to 52, are explicitly devoted to what they call the promotion of the dignity of marriage and the family. New in that ecclesiastical discourse is the so-called personalistic and integral relational approach to marriage against the background of the biblical discourse of the covenant. The Constitution characterizes marriage as strongly relational, and I quote, as a community of love in 47, as an intimate community of life and conjugal love in 48, and as a vocation in 49, which is brought about, I quote, by the marriage covenant, in other words, by an irrevocable personal mutual consent. As a result, the contractual language that spoke before on the right, I quote, the right to each other's body, as previously used in the 1917 canon law, is replaced by a more spiritual language that speaks of the mutual giving and receiving of oneself, which, following on the model of the relationship between Christ and the church, is not anymore a contract, but a covenant of surrender and love. What the teaching of Vatican II did here in this example and in all of its other issues was essentially reinterpreting, actualizing, very analogously with the process which we can discern in the development of biblical texts and their interpretation. The intention was open and brave, bringing the church closer to contemporary life. And yet today, 60 years thereafter, interpretation and reinterpretation, actualization and hermeneutical reconsideration is an essential ongoing process and necessary task. Discussing the origin, the development, the growth, and the different layers in the documents of Vatican II resembles strongly to the process of historical critical exegesis. However, also in analogy, in the same way in which historical critical exegesis synergically relates itself to the meaning of the final text, we can observe that the study of the documents of Vatican II needs a new contemporary lens today. And so, concludingly, its meaning can only stay vivid and relevant if our learning is true learning and our teaching is true teaching, open-minded, modest, and self-critical. With the 18th MEPC conference ahead, I wish you all wonderful days of true learning and true teaching, with an open mind in true exchange, with a modest listening ear, and an honest, self-critical attitude. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Benedict Lemelin, for your enlightening words. The lamp represents the triumph of light over darkness, knowledge over ignorance. I now humbly request all the esteemed dignitaries and Reverend Dr. Lijo Chalisheri, MEPC Secretary, Reverend Dr. Robi Kundaniil, MEPC Convener, Reverend Dr. Sebastian Chalakal, Rector, Marymatha Major Seminary, Brother Ashin Tumbanirapel, Student Coordinator, and Brother Bijoy Tattil, Student Council Representative, to come forward to kindle the flame of wisdom.
हसतो मा सकमया तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमया असतो मा सकमया तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमया मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमया.
Now we have the prize distribution for our meritorious rank holders from Marymatha Institute of Theology. I invite Reverend Dr. Lijo Chalisheri, Controller of Examination, Marymatha Institute of Theology, to announce the prizes.
It is time to honor those who have distinguished themselves through their dedication and their excellence. May I respectfully invite Dean Benedict Lamelin to kindly come forward and distribute the prizes as we begin the award presentation. Rank holders 2024-25. Third year Theology. First rank Einikel Noble Johnson. Second rank Tarth Nibin. Second year Theology. First rank Vellara Nidin. Second rank Pala Pulikel Thomas. First year Theology. First rank Georgis Christie. Second rank Eluvathingal Edwin. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Lijo Chalisheri, and congratulations, winners. It's my great pleasure to invite Dr. Dries Boschart from KU Leuven to present the keynote address on a persistent return to Vatican II.
Thank you very much. Reverend Rector Dr. Shalakal, Reverend Secretary Dr. Shaliseri, Reverend Convener Dr. Kunatanil, and Reverend Director Dr. Pulikan, dear Paul. Reverend Fathers, religious sisters, dear colleagues, dear students, sisters, and brothers. 2025 was a year of celebration for Vatican II studies. Surrounded by all of you, and with a program such as the one before us in the coming days, I have no doubt that you shared in the joy that the 60th anniversary of the Council once again offered a reason to celebrate, both as a high point in academic research on the Council and as a moment of its living memory. In particular, the coincidence of this celebration with the Jubilee year announced by Pope Francis brought the Council back into focus as a point of reference in the lives of Catholic faithful worldwide. This celebratory climax, 60 years on, also carried a sense of an overhanging shadow. Might this perhaps be the last moment in which the study and reception of Vatican II would be felt so strongly? The organization of this congress in 2026, and perhaps even more so, Pope Leo XIV's recently launched catechetical series on Vatican II, however, suggest the opposite. As Pope Leo XIV indicated, and I quote him here, while we feel called not to extinguish its prophetic impulse and to continue seeking paths and ways to implement its intuitions, it will be important to become acquainted with the Second Vatican Council once again at close range, and to do so not through hearsay or the interpretations that have been given of it, but by rereading of its documents and reflecting on its contents. With these words, and through the unfolding catechesis, he thus touches upon several aspects related to the hermeneutics and ongoing reception of Vatican II. First and foremost, indeed most strongly emphasized, is the rereading of the documents and their content. Secondly, he points to their prophetic value and their reception in the life of the Church today. Thirdly, and more easily overlooked, he refers to, and I quote him here again, the hearsay or the interpretations that have been given of the Council. If you wish, actually the living memory of Vatican II. In this paper now today, I will develop these three aspects by first focusing on the current state of the art of Vatican II scholarship. Secondly, on the challenges that come with the reception of Vatican II, particularly the reception of the Council in local church contexts. And then lastly, I will discuss the legacy of Vatican II from the perspective of memory, as a symbolic point of orientation through which Catholics shape their own and their community's self-understanding and their views on the future. And in all of this, I will try to make also reference to very recent scholarship on Vatican II that is being conducted at KU Leuven, but also learning here from the Indian context. Now, 60 years after the Council, the magisterium and academic theology have indeed spared no effort in allowing the Council to function as one of the central tenets of the Catholic Church. In recent years, this period of intellectual reception has been strongly marked by tensions surrounding conciliar hermeneutics. Within the framework of this lecture, I will not reopen this debate on hermeneutics. It suffices here to note that the study of the Council and its documents has been profoundly shaped by the questions on the continuity or discontinuity of the Council and its documents, related strongly to the approaches of the two central subdisciplines of church history and systematic theology, respectively. The specific discussion on the hermeneutics of Vatican II has led some even to indicate that this has left the traditional historiography of the Council largely preoccupied with what has been described as a somewhat sterile and sometimes useless debate on the hermeneutics of Vatican II. But more broadly, 60 years of Vatican II research has produced an abundance of studies which are widely acknowledged. The regular overviews published by Gilles Routier and by Massimo Fagioli, as well as the bibliography compiled by Philippe Roy and published a decade ago, clearly attest to this. All the more, the recently published Oxford Handbook of Vatican II and Cambridge Companion to Vatican II suggest that a point of consolidation has now been reached within the field of conciliar studies. At the same time, new projects are launched and studies keep appearing, suggesting that, in line with what Pope Leo XIV said, or where he's leading the path, that we are still in the process of further discovering the significance of Vatican II. Now, in the historiography of Vatican II, this moment of consolidation opens up precisely new avenues for further research. Such pointers have already been articulated in recent collective volumes, such as the American handbooks that I've just indicated, which emphasize the need to approach the history of the Council from new angles and methodological perspectives. At the same time, also international research initiatives, most notably the 60 Years After project, a collaboration between the Catholic University of Leuven, Tilburg University and the Australian Catholic University, have demonstrated that significant lacuna persist in the field of studies. This is particularly evident with regard to the redaction of histories of specific conciliar documents, such as Gravissimum Educationis and Orientalium Ecclesiarum, where substantial work remains to be done. A concrete outcome of this renewed scholarly attention, and one that may be of particular interest to some of you, is a recently defended doctoral dissertation by Dr. Jose De Vassi, The Catholic East on its way to Vatican II, the long road from the Oriental Vota to the schemata of the Oriental Preparatory Commission. Now, the same project and the same approach as it has been used by Dr. De Vassi, in addition, also emphasizes the great importance of intertextuality in the history of the Council and its documents. The way the redaction of the work of the different persons, commissions, and schemata have mutually influenced each other and are interconnected. An aspect that has not only raised attention to cross-textual themes and approaches in the conciliar documents, but also with texts outside of the Council. Conciliar documents promulgated during the final session of the Council, for example, such as Gaudium et Spes, cannot be adequately understood without reference to encyclicals like Pacem in Terris by John the 23rd, which, although promulgated outside of the formal conciliar context, exerted a decisive influence on its documents. Not only in level of academic approaches as a hermeneutical lens comes in intertextuality handy, as it also links with the technological advancement and the possibilities digital humanities offer the field of historical and theological study of Vatican II. This is a field in which our Center for the Study of the Second Vatican Council, besides its classical contribution to archival preservation and research, is now engaging all the more. We are currently in the process of digitizing our archives and allowing for open-access research on them. Doing so in OCR, so text recognition of these archival documents, and with clear descriptors, makes it evidently possible to also work with linked data in this context. This will allow, in the first place, a more formal intertextual study of the documents in our own digital archives, but will in the future also make it possible to link with other archival material, facilitating thus a more global and tangled understanding of Vatican II. In the field of Vatican II theological hermeneutics, the past decade has witnessed a remarkable shift towards a more global understanding of the Council, often articulated through collaborative and intercultural approaches. Whereas in 2015 a first attempt was made to bring together theologians from across the world to deliberate on the significance of Vatican II, Pope Francis' papacy and his reimagination of synodality also influenced the field of conciliar studies, leading to the first in its kind intercontinental and intercultural history and commentary of Vatican II in the form of the Vatican II Event and Mandate Project, in which more than 130 theologians worldwide are currently moving towards writing a new intercultural commentary on documents of Vatican II. Having been part of the group presenting the first volumes to Pope Leo XIV a couple of weeks ago, I can only rejoice how his recent catechesis stimulates this collaborative effort to move away from the traditionally Eurocentric understanding of the Council, and moreover the aim of publishing all these volumes in open access online is also making available the resources of Vatican II to a global audience. This, however, all remains strongly focused on the academic level. And though indicating the importance of Vatican II for the life of the Church, its value is, according to me, mostly still to be explored in two fields particularly. Bringing me to the second and third point of my presentation, relating to reception and memory respectively. Indeed, When it comes to the reception, this slow process of coming to a universal intercultural reception of the Council in academic theology should not distract from the ways the Council was received already during the event itself, but even more so in local contexts by local churches, by individual Catholic faithful. They, under the leadership of the magisterium, were the ones bringing the Council to life. It is often difficult to assess what now precisely was the reception of the Council and what was the logical continuation of Church's life. But what is clear is that in daily experience the impact of the Council became most tangible. Taking the example of another PhD research currently being conducted in Leuven by Sister Lily Anthony Arputa on the history of the Society of Jesus Mary Joseph in India, I can indicate, or I can only rejoice, that she clearly shows how the Council brought about a rediscovery of the congregation's original charism on the one hand, but also how it influences daily life, such as also bringing changes in their religious habit to better serve the community in which they were and still are at work. It was a process many religious male and female congregations underwent. Though these changes were part of the unfolding of the own history of the congregation, it at the same time often occurred under the banner of the Council. These individuals and collective narratives of developing one's own religious identity often made reference to the Council, not always directly to its text, but sometimes much more to its symbolic function as a point of orientation. The same is true for the local churches at large and collectively. Indeed, in many regions in the post-conciliar period, regional and national synods and meetings were held to, on the one hand, reflect on the meaning of the Council and its texts, and to make them better known in every community, while at the same time looking for new paths how the conciliar message could be implemented and followed in different local contexts. Father Paul has pointed out several times how most histories of the Council concentrate on Europe and North America, while giving little attention to the churches from the periphery. He calls for fresh research on overlooked events and sources from the global south. For example, not so recently, 3 years ago, in the keynote at KU Leuven at the Vatican II, or an International Vatican II Congress, he highlighted how the 38th Eucharistic Congress in Bombay, held from November 28 to December 8, 1964, right after the third session of Vatican II, which became a kind of testing ground for the Council. Key figures of the Council were present and took an active role as several of its directives were put into practice there, including those on liturgy, ecumenism, interreligious dialogue, and a concern for the poor. And then, as you probably know even better than I do, and I'm still constantly learning here, a next stage was then, or seems to be in the Indian context, the All India Seminar, which was convened by the Catholic Bishops' Conference of India. The seminar, prepared over several years, beginning in 1966, was eventually held in Bangalore, Karnataka, from May 14 to 25 in 1969. And brought together nearly 600 participants representing every section of the church. According to Pulican, and I quote him here, the All India Seminar on the Church in India was the first nationally significant event in the Indian Church in the reception of the Council's renewal. Now, the comprehensive report of the All India Seminar on the Church in India today notes that, and I quote the report, the National Seminar on the Church in India today owes its origins to the Second Vatican Council. The seminar was but the logical continuance of the renewal process applied in depth to the Church in India. Now, during the Vatican II sessions in Rome, internal discussions among the Indian bishops had already raised the idea of creating an all-India research institute to coordinate and strengthen the Church's activities in India. This proposal was taken up again and elaborated at the general meeting held in Delhi from October 13 to 20, 1966. And what began as an initial plan for an institute eventually took shape first as an action-oriented seminar designed to clarify the role and mission of the Church in India in light of the teachings of today. And now, as the research of one of my PhD researchers, Father Sinoj Matthew, on the All India seminar shows, the work for organizing the seminar officially started in February 1967, when a steering committee was set up to draft proposals and statements aimed at putting the teachings of Vatican II into practice within the Indian context. Among its concerns was the earlier idea of creating an all-India research institute to foster the growth of the Church in your country, and where I'm now a very happy guest to be also. It was this committee that took the initiative to propose the seminar, framing it within the renewed vision of the Council. The committee highlighted that the Church was entering a period of transition, reinterpreting herself not merely as an institution, but as the people of God, a central notion of Vatican II, in whom Christ is present. In this light, the Church's mission in India was understood anew: to make Christ visible to society, to offer his saving truth and peace, and to assume a fresh responsibility toward the nation by engaging in the resolution of pressing problems of people and human society. This required the Church to study carefully the context in which she lived and to discern the concrete tasks necessary for fulfilling her mission. Among the reasons advanced for organizing the seminar was the teachings of Gaudium et Spes, which affirmed that, and I'm quoting here now Gaudium et Spes, which affirms that by the power of the Holy Spirit, the Church will remain the faithful spouse of her Lord and will never cease to be the sign of salvation on earth. Led by the Holy Spirit, the Mother Church increasingly exhorts her sons and daughters to purify and renew themselves so that the sign of Christ can shine more brightly on the face of the Church. Building on this foundation, the seminar's motivation was expressed in the conviction that the Church is the visible sign of Christ's continued presence in the world, and as such is meant to be the leaven of renewal for human society in our time. The Church in India must also understand this new outlook and live according to the report of the seminar. Now, you have already seen parts of the organization, but indeed the seminar was the culmination of 3 years of intensive preparation that engaged the involvement of all sections of the people of God from every part of the country. Along the way to the event, a wide range of preparatory gatherings took place, including 14 regional seminars, 51 diocesan seminars, 9 national consultations, and 19 seminary seminars, drawing together more than 10,000 participants in total. To guide the discussions, 11 workshops on themes such as evangelization, dialogue with other religions, and socio-economic activities, together with 7 orientation papers, including the Church and her mission, the responsibility of the Church in India, and cultural forces shaping India, were prepared as background material for both the preparatory meetings and the All India seminar itself. And then, among the resolutions adopted by the seminar to reform the renewal of the Church in India was the proposal that, and I quote here, the most important aspect of this renewal is a reawakening of the laity to their vocation and mission, and a mission to the mystery of Christ present in the Church and the world. Activities and gatherings as such to receive the Council not only were ways that contributed to the practical implementation of the Council, they also disseminated the vision of Vatican II to a very broad audience, to the Catholic faithful worldwide, who in turn passed the orientation of Vatican II on from generation to generation. This is where the concept of memory comes in, which sometimes seems in tension with history. As Hutton, one of the specialists in memory studies, indicates, and I quote him here at length, history fixes the past in a narrative that aspires to provide a measure of certainty about what the past was like, but always at a critical distance. Memory, by contrast, may at any moment evoke the past in all of its possibilities, importing past into present insofar as that might be imagined. As philosopher Paul Ricoeur remarked, memory is a little miracle in its resources for creativity. In this respect, it may inspire the historian too. It is in this memory sense that the Council often comes to us, passed on through the tradition in what the French sociologist Daniel Hervieux-Léger would call the chain of memory. What has come to light now over the past years, and what I have evoked at the beginning of my lecture, is that for understanding the vision of Vatican II, much can still be gained when taking memory serious. Indeed, much more than history, it is memory that, because of its appeal to emotions among others, moves people and holds the potential of linking the past to the present day, an understanding of one's own and one's group's identity. Whereas for understanding the history of the Council and its reception, much can still be gained by focusing on non-European aspects of it, be it by tapping on new context and sources. It is the historical understanding of memory where the global importance of the Council can still come to light further. Indeed, local churches have created their own understandings of the Council, and with a turn to studying the history of these local churches, also these memory processes should be taken into account. What are the aspects of the Council that are emphasized? What are the aspects that are willingly or accidentally forgotten? Think in this sense, for example, of your own understanding of Vatican II. Chances are high that this view, or your view, is much more influenced by what past generations have shared with you on the Council and its effect on the daily life of the Catholic Church, rather than you are influenced by any academic historical study on the Council. This is also why, in our church community, shedding attention to memory is all the more important. This is also what the late Pope Francis referred to in his letter on the renewal of the study of church history. In this letter, he pointed out, and I quote him, the urgent need for a greater sense of history at a moment when we see a tendency to dismiss the memory of the past or to invent one suited to the requirements of dominant ideologies. He rightfully points out that we are currently flooded with memories, covertly prefabricated histories that serve to construct ad hoc memories, identity-based memories, and exclusionary memories. And indeed, against these kind of uses and functions of memories, history can now precisely help to understand the collective memory of the church community as it developed over time before, during, and after the Council. It precisely enables a link between ecclesiology and history, as it precisely recenters on the lived tradition of the Catholic Church and allows also for focusing on those whose voices were not able to make themselves heard over the centuries. This is also why, in the same letter, Pope Francis raises the importance of developing a genuine sense of history in young students of theology, of which many are among us today, in order to create these links with past generations and have them share also in the collective memory of the Catholic Church. And I think this is a task for all of us and for our global church community to do so. And in that sense, I also hope that the vision of Vatican II can continue to stimulate us doing that and can continue to inspire us. And I think this conference is a great contribution to that process. Thank you very much.
So we will have now discussion. For next 10 minutes, we will have discussion. Please raise your questions briefly and we will have good discussion. Please immediately go to the first question. Let me ask without losing time, no? Those who think they will ask second, they may ask first. Eh? That is to be done. This they will think about. The questions I wanted to ask. You see, there is. Do you think that in the new project also, in the new project of writing new commentaries of Vatican II, do we sufficiently take into account, say, the voices from the global south, from the Latin America, Africa, and Asia? Has it been taken sufficiently? What do you take on that?
It's a very challenging question, Father Paul, as I am part of the project. I think it is doing all its attempts it can to do so. I think in the same way as the synodal process that was initiated by Pope Francis is trying to do so as well. I think in that sense also the project has been greatly inspired by Pope Francis' vision of the church to indeed listen to all local churches in the church. At the same time, I think also in this project, the Vatican II Event and Mandate project, is at the same time a very academic project still. And I think this also touches upon what I indicated, this tension sometimes between academic research and local church life. And so I think this is one of the tensions in the project, that you have also very different academic cultures, and that in this project also these academic cultures come into tension. What is considered to be a theology that can be contained in a volume such as, or in a work process such as this. That is on the level of content. And then maybe if you allow me a second point, it's also, I think, to succeed in, and I think this is a learning process for everyone, to succeed in such projects of intercultural collaboration or intercontinental collaboration, one also has to reflect on very practical aspects by times. I think a very concrete example is, when do you hold your meetings? If meetings are always being held at European time, it is difficult for the global community to participate in the meetings. If meetings are held only in one continent, it is difficult for including all voices in the conversation. So I think this project presents a learning process, and I hope it can be the start for indeed a tradition of an intercultural theology of Vatican II.
Thank you. Next question.
Dr. Dries, right at the very beginning, you insisted upon the continuity and the discontinuity of the Second Vatican after 60 years of reception. Now, as a member of a European community, what do you feel of the European situation, whether there is a continuity or a discontinuity?
It's a very tricky question after all the debates on the hermeneutics of continuity and discontinuity. And I think that somehow with the proposal of the late Pope Benedict XVI, with focusing on reform, I think this somehow presented a possible close to these debates, which were very often, in my understanding, a kind of false debate. It was again different discourses that entered there. So on the one hand, there were historians working on Vatican II. Historians who are very used on pointing out complexities. I kept myself from doing so, and Paul knows how strongly I withheld myself to not go into details of redaction histories. In redaction histories, if you go into details, always small new things pop up. And it's also in that sense that the church renews itself. It adapts itself to the present day time in its pastoral intuition. So there are, on a daily basis, there are reforms, but in a historical perspective, within the academic discipline of history, this is often being presented as small discontinuities. At the same time, from a theological doctrinal perspective, the tradition of the church is a continuity, and this can also not be ignored. And I think in the strong debate on the continuity or discontinuity of the council, it was very often a mixture of different discourses, and which were not always recognized in their own right.
Next question. Somebody? Yeah, maybe then we can have a break, and then we come to the Paroch Hall at 11:40. We come to the Paroch Hall. We have sufficient time, and then we start immediately the next session. Yeah, thank you.
Now we'll go for a short coffee break. Refreshments are available